Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at a couple of interesting updates involving a player signing overseas, another assistant being signed, and a couple of other very intriguing pieces of news. And we've got some trade rumors involving the Devils, the Stars, the Blues, the Islanders, and a couple of other teams. But to all the updates from our past couple of days coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before I get into it, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for Friday's live stream at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, Saturday's live stream at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, and Tuesday's live stream at 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time, talking about the draft, free agency, and all other things involved. But in today's video, we've got another news and rumor video to discuss. This one's probably going to be a bit shorter than the last couple of ones because I've got a very intriguing mock draft video coming out later today. We're probably going to have a couple of very intriguing pieces of news. So we've got a lot of things to get to here today. So we're going to start off with a few pieces of very interesting updates. So first, when it comes to the player signing overseas, Misyul, who was traded at the trade deadline by New Jersey to Boston, he was a New Jersey Devils draft pick, solid player who has been playing over in Russia, signed in the KHL. So Misyul, I think, was RFA in the Boston Bruins organization. So instead of re-upping in Boston, probably would have been like a AHL player, maybe a call-up option for the Bruins. Instead of doing that, he signs over in the KHL, where he will probably get more playing time. So very interesting note there. But Misyul's pro-level career is short-lived, at least for time being, and he's headed back over to the KHL. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to a assistant coach being hired, and that is former Blackhawks and Canadiens bench boss Luke Richardson. Luke Richardson, who, like we just said, he was the Montreal Canadiens head coach. He was then the head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks the past couple of seasons, up until the middle of this past year when he was fired by the Chicago Blackhawks. He has joined Andrew Brunette's staff as an assistant in Nashville. So very interesting note there. The Preds are looking for another assistant. So we're just trying to fill out Brunette's staff, and Richardson winds up getting the assistant job. So that's a very interesting note there. But Richardson has joined Brunette's staff and has joined the Nashville Predators as an assistant. So very interesting note there. Going over to a conditional draft pick update that's very significant to Friday's first round of the draft, and that's the New York Rangers are indeed sending the 12th overall pick to the Pittsburgh Penguins as a part of the JT Miller trade. Now, as part of the JT Miller trade, when Miller was dealt to the New York Rangers by Vancouver, the Rangers promised the Canucks that they would trade either a top 13 protected first round pick this year, or if it was in the top 13, they would have the option to defer to 2026 and keep the 2025 first round pick. Well, that pick did wind up being 12th, so the Rangers had to make a decision. Do they keep this pick and give the Penguins the unprotected first round pick because the Canucks flipped that pick to Pittsburgh as part of the Marcus Patterson deal, or do the Rangers give the Penguins that pick that is 12th overall for this year and then take the unprotected first round pick and keep it for next year? And the verdict is that the Rangers will move the Pittsburgh Penguins the 12th overall pick. So now the Rangers do not have a first round pick for this upcoming draft. They are first round pickless unless they, of course, trade players and get back into the first round. And now the Pittsburgh Penguins have the 11th and the 12th overall pick on Friday's draft. So very interesting out there. But the condition on the Marcus Patterson JT Miller deal from the Rangers to the Penguins has indeed been finalized, and the Penguins get the 12th overall pick in this year's draft. So very interesting out there. Going over to the Hockey Hall of Fame, yesterday morning we saw the people being inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. Now there were a couple in the builder class, there were a couple of the women's side. I think Jennifer Botterill was one of the ones on the women's side, but the four big ones, which were the four guys on the players side and the men's side who wound up being inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, three of them actually played in the 2010s and were very early on Hall of Famers that were inducted into the Hall of Fame. Those are Joe Thornton, longtime San Jose Shark player, Zdeno Chara, longtime Boston Bruins player, and Duncan Keith, longtime Chicago Blackhawks player. So Chara won a cup back with the Boston Bruins. Thornton never won a cup, but he was a very, very long tenure player, and I think he's like in the top 20 or 15 all-time in point scoring or something like that. And then Duncan Keith won multiple cups with the Chicago Blackhawks. Has always been a very steady top four defensive player. All three of those guys are inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and backed by popular demand, Finally, Alexander Mogilny has made it into the Hockey Hall of Fame. I know there were a lot of fans out there who last year and even the year prior were very upset that Mogilny did not get into the Hockey Hall of Fame. Well, he's finally gone into the Hockey Hall of Fame and has joined all the other greats in the Hall of Fame. So very interesting note there. There were a couple of other guys in the builder class and a couple of other guys in the women's class, but in the men's class on the player side, Thornton, Chara, Mogilny, and Keith have all been inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. And even though Carey Price was eligible to go into the Hockey Hall of Fame this year, he didn't, so very interesting note there. But Mogilny, Chara, Thornton, and Keith have all been inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. And lastly, going over to the New York Islanders, Matt Martin, longtime bottom six player with the New York Islanders, had a short stint in Toronto as well, has officially retired from the NHL. Not too surprising there. Cal Clutterbuck, his longtime line mate, also retired earlier this year, so very interesting note there. Martin, throughout his entire career, was more of a middle six type guy. Towards the end of his career, a bottom six type guy, a guy who was not afraid to lay the body, start fights, get in that physical type of thing. He wasn't a big point producer, but was a very solid minute muncher. He was a big part of the identity line for the Islanders in the early 2020s. So very interesting note there, but Martin has retired, and not only has he retired from the NHL, but he is joining Matthew Darche's staff in the New York Islanders organization as a special advisor. So sort of a similar thing to what Eric Staal did with the Buffalo Sabres. Matt Martin is now going to be a special advisor to Matthew Darche and join the Islanders front office. So very interesting note there, but Matt Martin, who had a long career, a very good career, was a big piece in the New York Islanders organization for most of his career, has officially called it quits, and he's now joining Matthew Darche's staff as a special advisor to the GM. So very interesting note there. But those are all of the updates we got to talk about from our past couple of days. And next, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So because I have a feeling there are going to be quite a bit of trades today and over the next few days, I only got a couple of trade rumors here to talk about. There are some big ones though, so I want to touch on all of these things here. So first, with the Vegas Golden Knights, according to Nick Kyprios, he mentioned that at this current point in time, Nick Hague is a very likely candidate to get offer sheeted July 1st or following July 1st. So we know that players as of July 1st, even RFAs, can sign offer sheets, and Hague might be a prime target. We talked about Hofer, we talked about Bork, of course, before he wound up signing his new deal in Dallas. We've talked about Peterka, we've talked about Rossi, we've talked about all these guys, but Hague is one who hasn't really been mentioned a whole bunch in the offer sheet markets. Hague's RFA, he's coming off an AAV of $2.29 million. He's probably going to be in the $3 to $4 million range for a new contract, and the Vegas Golden Knights are not only very tight up against the cap, but on top of that, they want to try and make space to go after big time players in free agency like Marner, Besser, Ehlers, and paying Hague what he's going to want is not going to be able to help them with that. So that's why Hague has been mentioned in the rumor mill for quite some time as a trade chip. But if the Knights are not able to find a trade for him by July 1st, then Hague becomes a very likely offer sheet target. Like if someone were to offer Hague similar money to what the Blues offered Broberg, like somewhere in that $4.5 million range on like a 2 to 3 year deal, like I do not think Vegas would match that, and I think they would just take the second round pick. So I still think Hague will get dealt at some point before July 1st and that the offer sheet won't happen. But if that did happen and Hague was still unsigned on July 1st, I would not be one bit surprised if the couple of teams out there who need some defensive help had cap space, maybe their own second round pick for the next year's draft in 2026. I would not be one bit surprised if they took a run at signing Hague, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. Going over to the Utah Mammoth, according to Jeff Marek, he was not saying he's hearing this or anything, but he does wonder if a landing spot for Aaron Ekblad would be the Utah Mammoth. Now that's a little bit of an interesting one. In my opinion, I don't see the fit. The Utah Mammoth have a really solid blue line. They're going to have a couple of younger players like Lamoureux and Simashev come up in the next year or two. They have a really solid blue line. They have Darche, they have Sergachev, they have Marino, they have Kessler. They have a really solid blue line. Sure, could they use another top end guy? Yes. But is signing a guy like Aaron Ekblad to like a 6 or 7 year deal the real move there for the Utah Mammoth? I'm not exactly sure. So Marek does say that Utah could go after Ekblad. I guess it's a possibility. I mean, he's a couple in the defenseman. He could be a really solid top four ad, maybe be a guy who could play with a guy like Mikhail Sergachev. I just personally do not see a fit. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But if Aaron Ekblad does wind up hitting free agency, expect Utah to maybe be a team who has at least some interest in him, according to Marek. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going Going over to David Pagnotta, he mentions that the Tampa Bay Lightning would like to add a middle six winger before the end of the offseason. So we know the Bolts just re-signed Yanni Gourde. They aren't really losing any sort of top end free agents, but I do have a couple of depth guys like Atkinson and Glendening, and a couple of these types of players hitting the free agent market on July 1st. So it sounds like the Bolts would like to add a middle six winger. We've heard them be linked and want to add JJ Peterka. I just cannot see it cap-wise working. But I think if there's a cheaper end guy, someone who's making like $2 to $3 million on the trade market, signed for 1 to 2 more seasons, or if there's like a lower end UFA who they could try and target who isn't going to be making a whole bunch of money, I could see him try and target something like that. So I think the Bolts will try and add a middle six forward. I'm just not sure if this team has the cap space at this point in time to make it work. Like if they were to move a guy like Ryan McDonough or Anthony Thorelli, they would free up the cap space. I think they would go after a middle six winger. I'm just not sure if where they sit right now they have the best opportunity to get one. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But keep your eye on the Tampa Bay Lightning, as it sounds like they want to add a middle six winger before the offseason ends. Not exactly sure who they could target, but it definitely seems that they do have some interest in doing that. So very interesting note there. Going over to Pierre LeBrun, he mentions that the New Jersey Devils are going to be keeping a close eye on the Jason Robertson situation. So that's a very interesting note there. Robertson, he's been mentioned in the trade rumor mill. We know the Dallas Stars like to recoup some draft picks, would like to try and free up some cap space. They already have done it to some extent with Marchment, but they're going to need to do it a little bit more. Dumba, Liabushkin remain top end players to be cap dumps, but Robertson is still a possibility out there. It seems like it's going to come down to whether the Stars can at least get the groundwork for an extension with Robertson, or if it seems like his extension talks are not going well, there's a very likely chance he could get moved. So it seems that the Devils in particular, according to Pierre LeBrun, are a team that's going to be keeping tabs on that situation. We know that the Devils not have an overly great finish to the last year. They wound up losing in 5 games to Carolina in round 1 of the postseason. So I think this team's really going to try and go and get some more improvements. They have a really stellar blue line and a very fantastic goalie in Markstrom and net. They don't need upgrades at either of those positions. But I could definitely see him add 1 to 2 top 9 forwards to try and add some more goal scoring abilities into this team. They do have cap space. They have a lot of their key guys locked up on longer term, really solid deals. So going after a guy like Jason Robertson, even if he's just a rental for 1 year at $7.5 million, I don't think the Devils would be too opposed to doing that. And the Devils actually have a couple of really solid prospects and draft picks that they could offer the Dallas Stars, as well as some younger players who are already at the NHL level, like a Dawson Mercer. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on the New Jersey Devils, as if the Robertson situation turns ugly and the extension talks aren't really going anywhere and Dallas does decide to move on from him, definitely keep an eye on the Devils trying to acquire Jason Robertson. And lastly, going over to David Pagnotta, he mentions that the St. Louis Blues were a team that he's heard that are looking into trying to acquire Noah Dobson. Now that's an interesting one in my opinion. I don't feel like Dobson is the right move there for the St. Louis Blues. They have a ton of defensive players on that team. I don't think that this team needs to add another defenseman. I think they need to try and focus on re-signing Hofer and maybe reworking the middle six of their forward group a little bit. But I can't see them trying to go after Noah Dobson. So, I mean, it's a possibility. I think the only way they move Dobson is if they have some sort of other deal to try and move a guy like Nick Leddy, who's got 1 year left at $4 million or something like that. And I could see why they have some interest. Like you add Dobson, even though he's going to be making $9 to $10 million, but you add Dobson to the top 4, you're going to have a top 4 of Fowler, Falk, Parayko, Dobson next year. Like that would be a very, very scary top 4 for the St. Louis Blues. Now, Blues do have things to trade. They have a plethora of solid forward prospects. They have a pretty solid draft capital, including the 19th overall pick in this upcoming draft. I have seen some people, including Frank Saravalli, wonder, not say that there's any rumors out there saying this, but wonder if maybe the St. Louis Blues would consider moving Jordan Kyrou. Like I think if Kyrou was available for a trade, maybe a 1-for-1 deal, or maybe something surrounding a Kyrou for Dobson type deal would be something that would be very intriguing for the New York Islanders. So I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen. I personally do not see Dobson going to St. Louis, and I don't think that's the right move there for the Blues. But if they can get their hands on him and the deal makes the right sense, maybe there's an opportunity there for St. Louis to add a solid top 4 right shot defenseman and Noah Dobson. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But that's what I'm talking for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think that the Blues could acquire Noah Dobson? Do you think that the Devils could acquire Jason Robertson? What sort of a middle six winger do you think the Tampa Bay Lightning will try and add? Could Utah go after Aaron Ekblad? And is Hague a likely offer sheet candidate in Vegas? Definitely, I would love to hear your thoughts on all of that, plus the updates that we talked about from our past couple of days. Definitely your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's ongoing talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really liked it, remember to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for Fridays, Saturdays, and Tuesdays live streams talking about the draft, free agency, and everything in between. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. I'll link to that down in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.